Sandra Kowalski had exactly $11.43 in her wallet the morning her son's inhaler ran out. She knew the number by heart because she had counted it 3 times the night before, sitting at the kitchen table after Danny fell asleep, spreading the bills flat under the yellow light like maybe the counting would change something. It didn't. 11:43. That was everything between her and the end of the month, and the month still had 9 days left. Outside the window of their apartment in Clarksburg, West Virginia, the October sky was low and gray, the kind of gray that settles into the hills and doesn't leave for weeks. The maple tree across the parking lot had gone the color of rust. Sandra watched it while she drank her coffee, half a scoop of ground stretched thin, and listened to the sound of Danny breathing in the next room. 8 years old. He'd had asthma since he was 2, the year his father left for a job in Phoenix and never quite made his way back. Not dramatic. No fight, no final door slam. Just a slow drift, like a boat with a cut rope, until one day Sandra realized she hadn't heard from him in 4 months and stopped waiting. She was 37 now. She worked the morning shift at a laundromat on Pike Street, 6 to 2, folding other people's clothes and making change and listening to the machines run. It was honest work, she didn't mind it, but the hours were cut in August. Her manager Greta had said it apologetically, wouldn't meet Sandra's eyes, and Sandra had gone from 30 hours a week to 19. 19 hours didn't cover rent and groceries and the electric bill and Danny's medication. Something always had to lose, and lately the something was groceries. The albuterol inhaler, the blue one Danny kept in the front pocket of his backpack, had run out the previous afternoon. Sandra had heard it, that hollow, airy click when there was nothing left, and her stomach dropped. She had called the pharmacy on Elk Street immediately, $48 for a refill without insurance. She'd lost her insurance in September when her hours dropped below the threshold. $48. She turned the number over in her mind all evening the way you turn a stone, looking for a softer side that isn't there. She called her sister Louise in Richmond. Louise didn't pick up. She tried twice more before bed. In the morning, she woke Danny early, helped him into his corduroy jacket, and walked him the 4 blocks to school. The air was cold and damp. Danny walked fast, the way kids do when they're trying to keep up with someone taller, his sneakers slapping the wet sidewalk. He didn't complain about the cold. He never really complained. That was the thing about Danny that broke Sandra's heart quietly and regularly. He had learned, early and without anyone teaching him, not to ask for things. "Mom," he said, halfway down the block. "What if I need my inhaler today?" "I'm going to pick up a refill this morning," Sandra said. She kept her voice even. "It'll be there when you get home." He nodded like he believed her, and that trust was almost worse than if he'd pushed back. She dropped him at the school doors, watched him disappear inside, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned and walked the 6 blocks to the pharmacy on Elk Street. Randall's Pharmacy had been on that corner for 30 years. The sign was faded green, the kind of green that had once been bright. Inside it smelled like antiseptic and the powdery sweetness of the candy display near the register. Sandra had been coming here since she moved to Clarksburg 8 years ago. The pharmacist, a woman named Carol who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, knew Danny's name. Carol wasn't at the counter that morning. A younger man Sandra didn't recognize was filling in, methodical and pleasant, tapping at the computer with 2 fingers. Sandra gave Danny's name. She waited. She already knew what the number would be. $48, the young man said, turning the monitor slightly so she could see. Sandra set her wallet on the counter and took out the $11. Then she looked in the small zippered pocket where she kept change for the laundromat machines. 3 quarters, 2 dimes, 4 pennies. She lined them up carefully. $11.99. She was $36.01 short. She stood there for a moment. The fluorescent light above her hummed. A woman behind her in line shifted her weight. "I'm sorry," Sandra said, to no one in particular. Can I come back this afternoon?" The pharmacist nodded, already turning back to his screen. "We'll hold it." Sandra gathered her money back into her wallet. She turned around and the woman behind her, late 60s, reading glasses, a small canvas bag, looked at her with an expression that might have been pity or might have been impatience. Sandra couldn't tell and didn't want to. She walked out into the gray morning and stood on the sidewalk in front of the pharmacy, and for a long moment she didn't move. The cold came through her jacket. Up the street, a truck backed into an alley, beeping. A dog barked somewhere. Normal Tuesday sounds, the city going about its business, indifferent and continuous. Sandra had not cried in front of Danny in 2 years. She had a rule about it. But standing alone on Elk Street, she let herself have 30 seconds. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth and looked at the maple tree at the corner and breathed carefully until the 30 seconds were done. Then she put her shoulders back and started walking toward the laundromat. She had gotten maybe half a block when she heard a voice behind her. "Excuse me." She turned. A man was coming out of the pharmacy, pulling a jacket zipper up against the cold. He was somewhere around 40, maybe a few years older, with the kind of hands that meant outdoor work, rough at the knuckles, nails cut short. He had on a gray Henley under the jacket and work boots that had seen better years. He wasn't remarkable in any particular way. He looked like half the men in Clarksburg. "I don't mean to bother you," he said. He stomped a comfortable distance away, not crowding her. "I was behind you in there." "I heard." Sandra looked at him. She felt her face go careful, the way it did when she wasn't sure what was coming. "I'd like to pay for it," he said. "The inhaler." She opened her mouth, and what came out first was, "No, thank you, but no." "Okay," he said. He didn't push. He just stood there, and there was something in the way he stood, easy, unhurried, that made her feel like he would wait as long as she needed. "I don't take things from strangers," she said. "That's a good policy," he said. He looked briefly at his boots, then back up at her. "I've got a kid too. She's 12 now, but when she was little she had ear infections, constantly, every few months like clockwork. And there was a year when things were bad. I was between jobs, my wife and I had just separated, and I couldn't cover the prescription, $40. He paused. A woman I'd never met in my life ahead of me in line at the CVS on Main just handed the pharmacist her card and paid it, didn't ask my name, just did it and left. Sandra watched him. "I've been looking for a way to pass that on ever since," he said. "Your kid needs his inhaler, that's it, that's the whole thing." The wind moved through the maple at the corner. Sandra felt something in her chest loosen just slightly, the way something very tight loosens when you stop fighting it. "He has asthma," she said. "He's 8. "What's his name?" "Danny." The man nodded. "I'm Garrett," he said. "Garrett Oakes." She told him her name. He shook her hand, a brief, straightforward handshake, no ceremony, and they went back into the pharmacy together. At the counter, Garrett set down his card without comment. The transaction was quiet and quick. When Carol appeared from the back with the small white bag, she looked between them with a practiced neutrality that suggested she had seen harder things in this pharmacy than a stranger paying for a child's medicine. Sandra took the bag. It was lighter than $11.43 somehow, the weight of relief, maybe, which has a different physics than the weight of worry. Outside again, she thanked him. She wasn't sure she was saying it right, wasn't sure the words were enough, but she said them. "Thank you, I'll pay you back, I want to pay you back." Garrett shook his head, not dismissively but gently, the way you shake your head at something that has already been settled. "You don't owe me anything. But if you want to do something." He paused. "Someday when things are easier, you'll be standing somewhere and you'll see someone in that same spot you were in 5 minutes ago. Just do what that woman did for me." Sandra held the pharmacy bag and looked at him. The gray light of the morning lay over everything evenly. "What was her name?" she asked. "The woman at the CVS." He almost smiled. "I never got it." He walked away up Elk Street, hands in his jacket pockets, boots on the wet sidewalk, and Sandra watched him go until he turned the corner near the auto shop and was gone. She stood there for a while. Then she walked back to the laundromat. Greta was surprised to see her early. Sandra didn't explain. She put on her apron and started folding. That afternoon when Danny came home from school, the inhaler was on the kitchen counter beside his glass of water and his afternoon crackers. He picked it up, tested it, and set it back down with the casual relief of a child who had trusted his mother and been proven right. "Thanks, Mom," he said, already pulling out his homework folder. Sandra sat across from him at the table. The maple outside had caught the late afternoon light and gone briefly gold. She watched Danny bend over his worksheet, pencil moving, brow slightly furrowed in the particular way he concentrated on math problems. She thought about Garrett Oakes and his daughter's ear infections and the woman at the CVS whose name he never knew. She thought about the chain of it, invisible and long, running backward 3 years and forward 3 years she hadn't lived yet. She thought about what he'd said, "Someday when things are easier." She didn't know when that would be. But she thought it would come. And she thought she would know the moment when she saw it, that specific posture, that careful counting, that trying not to let it show on your face. She would know it because she had just been standing in it. 3 weeks later, Sandra's hours at the laundromat went back up to 28, not 30, but enough. She picked up a Saturday morning shift at the diner 2 blocks over, clearing tables, and the tips were modest but steady. By November she had a small cushion, not security, not yet, but buffer. The difference between $11.43 and something she didn't have to count 3 times. In December she found Garrett's name in the phone book. There was one listing, Garrett Oaks, on Beaumont Street, and she wrote him a card. Not a check. She had thought about sending money and then thought better of it. Instead she wrote 3 sentences. My son Danny is doing well. You helped us more than you know. Thank you. She didn't know if he'd remember her. She mailed it anyway. The card she got back was short. It said, good, that's all, just good. The following October, almost exactly a year after Elk Street, Sandra was at the grocery on 4th Avenue when she noticed a woman at the register ahead of her. She was in her early 40s, probably, with a toddler on her hip and a boy of maybe 10 standing beside her, and she was doing the same arithmetic Sandra had done countless times. Picking up one item, setting it aside. Looking at the register display. Setting aside another. The cashier waited. The line waited. The woman's face was very still in the way faces go still when you're concentrating hard on not falling apart in public. Sandra looked at the total on the screen, $31.18. She looked at what the woman had set back, a jar of peanut butter, a box of oatmeal. She thought about a gray morning on Elk Street. A man in a Henley and work boots who had spoken to her without any expectation of anything in return. A handshake, brief and businesslike. You don't owe me anything. Sandra stepped forward. I've got it, she said quietly. The woman looked at her the way Sandra had looked at Garrett, careful, uncertain, a little guarded. Sandra recognized the look exactly. It's okay, Sandra said. Someone did it for me once. You'll do it for someone else. She handed her card to the cashier before the woman could argue. The toddler, who had been solemnly watching the whole exchange, reached out and touched Sandra's sleeve with one small hand. Sandra looked down at him. He looked back at her with the absolute seriousness of very young children and then hid his face against his mother's shoulder. Walking out of the grocery with her own bag, Sandra felt something she didn't have a good word for. Not pride, exactly. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter and more solid than either. The feeling of a thing completed, a circle closed, or maybe not closed, maybe just continued, one more link in something that had no visible beginning and no visible end, running through pharmacies and grocery stores and CVS counters, through strangers who never exchanged names, through children who grew up not knowing that a moment of grace had once been extended on their behalf by someone their parents met once on a cold morning and never saw again. Danny was 15 the first time Sandra told him the story of Garrett Oaks. They were driving back from a dentist appointment, stuck in traffic on the bridge, rain on the windshield, wipers going. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Do you ever see him? Danny asked. Garrett. Once, Sandra said. At the farmer's market, we said hello. He had his daughter with him. Did you tell him what you did, at the grocery store? Sandra thought about it. No, she said. I don't think that was the point. Danny looked out the window at the rain and the river below, dark and moving. I want to do that someday, he said. What you did? Sandra kept her eyes on the brake lights ahead of her. You will, she said. You'll know when. I keep coming back to that image of Sandra at the pharmacy counter, $11 spread flat, a handful of coins lined up like she was trying to will them into being more than they were. $36 short. 1 cent short of $36. That kind of specific cruelty is something only real life invents. What strikes me about Sandra isn't that she was rescued, it's that she showed up anyway. She'd already called her sister twice. She'd already done the math 3 times the night before. She knew what the number was and she went to the pharmacy regardless, because not going wasn't something she was willing to do. That's not a small thing. That's a person who has decided, somewhere deep and quiet, that she will keep moving even when the moving doesn't make sense yet. There's a kind of strength in that, not the loud kind, not the kind that gives speeches, just the steady, unglamorous kind that gets up and puts on a coat and walks 4 blocks in the cold with a kid who trusts her completely. And Garrett. I think about what it took for him to say something. Most of us walk past. Most of us see the moment and let it go because we don't want to intrude, or we're not sure, or we tell ourselves it's not our place. Garrett had been carrying that woman from the CBS for years, a stranger who paid $40 and left without giving her name, and when he finally saw his chance to pass it on, he had enough clarity to act on it. That's not luck. That's what happens when someone has actually thought about what they owe the world and decided the answer is something. The smartest thing Garrett did wasn't paying for the inhaler. It was the way he explained himself, plainly, without making Sandra feel small, giving her a reason that had nothing to do with pity. He gave her a story she could hold on to instead of a debt she had to carry. That's what good judgment looks like in practice. Not grand gestures, knowing what to say and how to say it so the person on the other end can actually receive it. And then there's Danny. 15 years old in that car, rain on the windshield, listening to his mother tell him the story. I want to do that someday. He didn't have to be taught that. He absorbed it from watching her, the way she handled the hard years without bitterness, the way she told the story without resentment, the way she had quietly walked into that grocery store a year later and done exactly what Garrett asked her to do. Kids learn almost nothing from what we say. They learn from what they see us do when it costs us something. What Sandra and Garrett passed between them wasn't money. It was a way of being in the world. The idea that when you have a little more than nothing, you look around, and if you see someone standing where you once stood, you do the thing. Not because you'll be thanked, not because you'll be thanked. Not because you'll be thanked. Not because you'll be thanked, just because the chain has to keep moving, and you happen to be the link that's here right now. I think that's the only kind of legacy that actually compounds, not wealth, not reputation. Just the small, repeated choice to treat a stranger's problem as something that belongs to you a little bit too. Danny will do it someday, he already knows how.